It's in the evening. It's on Friday, June 26, 2026. Mark Kulak, Houstonic Live. I've been toying with this idea for a little while right now. It has been observed that there's a big push right now for the United States to be seen around the world as the bad guy. And a lot of the push is coming out of India. The United States, via this Dr. Fauci, Anthony Fauci, is the bad guy because the United States caused COVID, because the United States is bad. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard, this was on the way out the door, released all of these Fauci documents. I haven't even looked at them yet. I don't care. I've probably already seen a whole bunch of them. We know that whatever they are, they're only going to release what they want them to say. Presumably, if they've already held back this many, there's probably a whole bunch more. There were multiple moments where Tulsi Gabbard was accused of being a Russian agent, someone that was working for Russia or helping Russia, not necessarily when she was a representative, but during her tenure when she was, became like this influencer vying for VP candidates, or when she was working as a director of the Office of National Intelligence. And it sounded absurd to me because I had known, and because there's an abundant amount of evidence that, and I've interviewed people who convinced me that Russia had some sort of legitimate reason for some of their military operations in Ukraine. In particular, their concerns about these biological weapon facilities, but they're not really bioweapon facilities. They're research facilities, or they're just biological monitoring facilities, which, believe it or not, almost every single water reservoir plant in the United States has to monitor algae and do other sort of biological monitoring from time to time. So it's a little bit of a stretch to call these things weapon research facilities. And she puts this out there, and there was a reminder of Fauci and Ukraine and Fauci money, and I'm starting to put the pieces together here. The big story is this. I believe that the United States government, in particular, a sub-agency within the U.S. military called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DTRA, which is an old offshoot of an endeavor related to nuclear weapons out of the United States State Department, was shifted inside the U.S. military. It's called the Pentagon, but the Defense Threat Reduction Agency takes marching orders from both the State Department and the military. I believe the Defense Threat Reduction Agency had budget and was instructed to plant evidence in Ukraine and to unnecessarily provide financial backing to very pedestrian biological research facilities, starting in 2005, to create a perception that there was U.S.-funded biological weapons programs in Ukraine. And then this information was leaked, provided to Russia, so Russia would have justification for its military operations in Ukraine, which were protected under United Nations. And remember, it was Scott Ritter, a United Nations weapon inspector, that was on with Dan Cohen and other people right around the same time that I was talking to Dilyana Gatsincheva, I don't know how to pronounce her name, who I believe is some sort of Russian asset. All making the point that this was okay because the United States was getting big and sloppy and NATO bad and all this other stuff. Now it makes sense why a very junior senator, Barack Obama, who for no reason was brought to Ukraine like within months of becoming a senator, and then went on to become, I think, the youngest president in U.S. history. Why was Barack Obama brought to Ukraine? I don't think he asked. He was groomed and then brought there. And then why did someone from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Andrew Weber, who, by the way, is in my book Germs, that came out on September 9th, 2001, why did Andrew Weber shake anthrax in front of the face of Barack Obama, the junior senator in Ukraine? record it, and then share it at the beginning of COVID. Why did that happen? I'll tell you why. Because they wanted that evidence seen. They wanted the world to see it, and now they're going to cover their asses and sink the United States' reputation by saying the U.S. did this. And Russia, under the protection of UN oversight, went into Ukraine. Now, I know this is a big story about another oil field and resources in Ukraine, and I'm sure Ukraine has a lot of resources. That's part of it, okay? I think that's part of it. Of course, the resources couldn't have been claimed by Russia if there weren't weapon labs to begin with, or the belief of weapon labs. There were no weapon labs. Just because somebody has some dried anthrax on a shelf somewhere. Why did the anthrax facilities that were mobile in Iraq disappear at the same time? I'll tell you why. Because they intentionally moved them to Ukraine. Again, so that over the next years, 10, 15 years, they would create a story of weapon labs in Ukraine. Why did the United States Defense Threat Reduction Agency fund biological facilities in the nation of Georgia? Why did they do that? Precisely to provide justification for whatever actions Russia may do. Oh, they also wound up going to Armenia, interestingly enough. Tulsi Gabbard did not plan this, but Tulsi Gabbard is now an unwitting participant in this. I'm not pro-Russia or anti-Russia. I am so past that game. I actually wish all of this espionage crap would end so we could all grab backpacks and then just all explore the world together while at the same time enjoying our own national sovereignty. But I don't know if that's going to happen right now. But I'm not taking positions pro or anti this. Isn't he from Hawaii? You know, I heard he was born in Hawaii. That's kind of interesting. If he was in Hawaii, spent time in the Philippines, I wonder if he had time with, oh my goodness, Shimmer. I wonder if he knew a young Tulsi, because her government endeavor started young, but her acceleration also started in 2005. And in 2005, what else happened? The United States signs into this weird treaty with Ukraine, one of the more bizarre, pointless treaties, but I guess we have to follow the law right now. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. And we, everyday people, everyday citizens, are encouraged to be really mad or in love with the firewalls, such as Barack Obama, Tulsi Gabbard, etc. Now, I haven't done a lot of life research on Barack Obama. I find him hard to watch because I think his life has been such that he really believes that it was just his own charisma and capabilities that led him to some of these positions. I think he believes that. And if not, he sells it so well that that's how it feels like. But, you know, on a personal level, you know, I'm sure he and I could go out for a sandwich or something and have a lot to talk about. Tulsi Gabbard is not in charge either. She's run by someone, something. I don't really know what it is, but this is the story that makes sense. First of all, RNA cannot pandemic. RNA cannot pandemic. That is an ultimate truth. RNA cannot pandemic. It cannot pandemic naturally. It cannot pandemic from bats. It cannot pandemic from caves. It can't pandemic, even if it comes out of a laboratory. It cannot pandemic under any situation whatsoever. So knowing that RNA can't pandemic, do people then immediately go, well, Fauci caused a pandemic in a laboratory? Fauci, if he had 1 billion people working for him and $100 trillion, still could not have made a virus that caused a pandemic, because RNA cannot pandemic. It can't. RNA can't pandemic. RNA can't pandemic. So therefore, there's nothing Fauci could have done to cause a pandemic. Nothing at all other than participate in mass murder and call it a pandemic. The only thing Fauci could have done is to participate and be complicit in mass murder and allow it to be called a pandemic. That's it, because RNA can't pandemic. So whatever's in those files is bullshit unless it clearly states how Fauci, I'm not saying it was his idea, but at the very least complicit or went along with it unknowingly, there was mass murder, and it was through statistical management and rebranding called a pandemic. I'm not saying more people didn't die. Obviously, more people died. Way more for a certain period of time than otherwise would have died. But it wasn't a pandemic. Wasn't a pandemic as they define it, because RNA can't pandemic. RNA cannot pandemic. So every answer that includes an RNA pandemic, China lab, Ukraine lab, Fauci funded, Russia funded, UN funded, NATO funded, whether it comes from space, whether it comes from a cave, whether it comes from Walgreens, whether it comes from Target, whether it comes from your mom's kitchen, no matter what, it can't pandemic. So the world right now, and India is taking up this charge. Isn't that odd? And I'm not saying the Indian people, the Indian government. And the Indian government is like this with the future of the United Nations. That's the trick here. And Russia used United Nations. And you know what they blamed it on? NATO. They said NATO is putting gain-of-function laboratories in Ukraine. We have to invade Ukraine. And Americans didn't know what to think. Many Americans were compelled to support this idea that Russia had to do it. And you know how they did it? Was they had Democrats within the United States drag in a larger-than-life Ukraine flag into the United States Congress. They encouraged Democrats within the United States to put Ukraine flags on their bumper stickers, on their houses, on the street, on bridges. Now, I mean, people love Ukraine. Good for them. Okay, fine. I got no problem with that. But it was almost meant to create a hysteria, which made people go, something's not right. It was almost meant to fuel a belief that there was something wrong in Ukraine and maybe Russia was justified. This is evil, diabolical stuff, everybody. This is why, when I look at that timeline, my timeline that I've been working on, in particular for 2022, now it makes sense. So, again, Dilyana Gasincheva, February 26, 2022, Ukraine State Department removed documents from the Ukrainian website. Oh, my goodness. First of all, why the hell were they even on the website in the first place? All of this stuff to create the perception that there something was being hidden. Oh, my goodness. Tucker and Tulsi are talking because NATO is bad. Oh, my goodness. And then we have Scott Ritter, United Nations weapon inspector, being very friendly, copacetic with the challenges that Russia has, talking with you, Dan Cohen. And then I said, what the heck? I'm going to call Dilyana. And I noted that it's a Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Why does that piss people off? Because the DTRA is a very odd and unique Pentagon agency that has its roots in the Nunn-Lugar a cooperative threat reduction program, which was really United States State Department. And the DTRA gets money from both the State Department and the Pentagon. And the DTRA doesn't always share everything that's going on inside with either the Pentagon or the State Department. It's an agency that probably has a lot of good people, but I really don't like them. I really don't like them. And I think the DTRA, it showed complicity with the United Nations, and the United Nations, which probably, with growing global powers, changing world paradigms, might have had an interest in weakening the United States, maybe strengthening Asia, strengthening Russia, and the DTRA, I believe, planted evidence and needlessly sent money to very small pedestrian laboratories in Ukraine to provide justification for Russia to invade Ukraine. I apologize for not thinking about this at that level at that time. I admit, based upon what I knew, based upon, and this is the thing, based upon my belief that RNA can pandemic, I felt as though Russia was justified. That bad underlying idea that RNA can pandemic created all kinds of flexibility for me to believe and accept different things. But once you know RNA can't pandemic, there is no scenario where Russia was justified in charging into Ukraine to save their own ass. There's no genetically modified viruses there. There's no virus there that's genetically modified to only, impact Russian people. It's all bullshit. It's all lies. It was lies. And of course it's lies because the underlying idea, RNA can't pandemic in any situation. You can't make an RNA virus that only impacts people that like to eat sushi. You can't make an RNA virus that only goes after people that are Philadelphia Philly fans. You can't make an RNA virus that only goes after short people or tall people or basketball players or people with light skin or dark skin. You can't do it. 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 So there is no situation at all. No matter how much money was pouring into Ukraine, from where, for how long. The underlying assumption that there could be an RNA pandemic made all of this possible. And then Dilyana had to do all of these interviews. In most of these interviews, she repeated the phrase Defense Threat Reduction Agency a few times, but with increasing frequency, the phrase was not used, and they kept saying Pentagon. Pentagon, military, Pentagon, Pentagon, because the goal was for the public of the world to see the United States military and the United States military as a whole funding laboratories or NATO funding laboratories. But in reality, it's one tiny little shit agency within the United States military, the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which also employs Robert Malone, by the way. In fact, all of our U.S. research, all of our U.S. countermeasure stuff came out of the same godforsaken little agency, which is connected with the United States State Department and is very much in favor of supporting the long-term growth of the United Nations. And now, Tulsi Gabbard's parting song is, hooray, everyone, here's your evidence, world. I'm going to show the world how Fauci and the U.S. military and NATO are all working against you. And then she's going to go on and have her great big blast out yoga day with the United Nations and the rest of the government of India. People are going to be thinking that it's an Indian thing or it's a Hindu thing or whatever, or it's a Democrat thing, or you're just a Putin guy, or this. People are going to miss it. Now, surprisingly, I support the United Nations. Right now, there's too many things that are unsettled about the balance of power around the world to say that there's going to be one and only one governing agency for everything. I think we need a long time where we have multiple non-government organizations, and it's not always clear how they cooperate. I think we need to do this for a little while because this constant attempt for them to undermine each other is going to backfire. And if I may, I just posted a video short. We were told within the United States by meddlers online, mostly from other countries, including Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, India, Japan, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Scotland, Norway, Romania, England, and I can probably keep going on, okay, that we really did have an RNA pandemic. And the reason why we had more deaths had nothing to do with the drug overdose problem. And life expectancy was not going down because of opioids. said our Canadian Jessica Rose, that came to the United States and mentored in part by the same Robert Malone of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. We all knew that there was record numbers of fatal drug overdoses in the United States during the pandemic years. We knew that. We knew that they were up extensively since the year 2016. We knew that. We knew that many people were trying to say they weren't up that much because 2016 was a baseline, even though 2016 was at that time a record year. It wasn't a baseline. Now, I thought that the baseline was probably closer to 20,000, 25,000. That's what I've been thinking. Long-term baseline annual number of people that die of drug overdoses in the United States, probably going back to around 1980. That's what I thought. And the data is surprisingly hard to get of how many people died per year in the United States of drug overdoses before 1998. Fortunately, I was able to find a report for, it was basically for insurance companies, where they were doing modeling on how many people had died over the previous years of fatal drug overdoses in the United States up until the year 2011. And I was able to gather data, and I was shocked to learn that the number of fatal drug overdoses in the United States in the year 1980 was just a shade over 6,000. Now, that's a horrible number, but it was 6,000. So by the time we got to 1998, 1999, and we had 17 to 18,000 for the year, for each of those years, fatal drug overdoses in the United States, we were already at 3 times the national our average of 1980. I didn't realize that. And then from there, from that 18,000, give or take, it went up to over 110,000 for 1 and maybe even 2 years, 2022 and 2023, which means from our real average fatal drug overdoses per year in the United States, which mostly impact people under 45, and I'm gonna hit even harder on this, most of the people are in their 20s. The long-term average was 6,000, meaning that in the year of 2022 and 2023, when supposed ethical skeptics and other mostly foreign, probably UN-aligned meddlers on the internet pretending to be flag-waving MAGA Americans, saying opioids weren't the reason life expectancy going down, in those years of 2022 and 23, we had 18 times the number of deaths in each of those years as our baseline of 6,000, a 1,800% increase. And as far as I know today, we have yet to have one other person other than Jonathan Cooey with any sort of even minimal reach to state this. We have Ro Khanna of India and representing UN interests, along with his Bannon friend, saying we need to think about the victims of Epstein, but they're all alive still. I don't see anybody saying, you know what, voter fraud matters, but let's not even talk about the fact that we have over 1 million missing voters just on this chart alone. We have 1 million deaths, or at least. We had enough deaths in the year 2023 of fatal drug overdoses to meet the combined totals of the years 1980, 1981, 1982, 1983, 1984, 1985, 1986, 1987, 1988, 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, and 1994 combined. And then we did it again the next year. And nobody will talk about this. They still are pushing a mythology that RNA can't pandemic. Well, here's some news. It's not news for you. RNA cannot pandemic. And they use the deaths, murders of Americans of fatal drug overdoses. They use murders of people in hospitals given supplemental oxygen to cause acquired respiratory distress syndrome, where they were then put on COVID protocols and killed. to say we had a deadly novel virus, to suggest, to insinuate there was an RNA pandemic. But RNA can't pandemic. There's just murder. There's only murder. That's it. There's poisonings and murder. You can leak out some chemicals. You can blow up a city. You can cause damage that way. But you cannot have a pandemic. You just can't. And they used this phenomenon combined with population pyramids. They used this phenomenon and these lies as also part, with this timing here, to allow Russia to invade Ukraine. That invasion was planned a long, long time ago. It started all the way back in 2005 when the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Andy Weber, Scott Ritter, by the way, also in the book that came out in September 9th, 2001. It's almost as if they've been planning this shit before 9/11. Planted information, planted samples with an unwitting young American named Barack Obama, who in that instance is now a victim of being set up. These chicken shit little midget Americans using an American, and I'm stressing this, an American like Barack Obama. And now they want Americans all attacking Barack Obama because of some idea about his wife? Seriously? Sorry, I'm not digging this stuff anymore. I'm not standing up for this anymore. They planted evidence, and then they encouraged Americans to either relentlessly defend Ukraine and RNA pandemics, or to say Ukraine is bad because supported by commie, whatever, something, Democrats. You should love Russia and Putin. It's horrible. And in that case, RNA still can pandemic. And this is why both sides are fueled with so much nonsense that instead of looking at all of these lives of beautiful young Americans that were taken with chemicals on the streets, they won't talk about it. There's people who lost their own kids that won't talk about it because they're so upset about what their friends are liking and sharing on Facebook about Putin or Buttigieg or something. There's your Tulsi story. Why didn't anybody else making money able to figure that out? All they did was threw distractions at me. It's not going to get any easier, folks. Not going to get any easier for those trying to muddy the waters. It's not getting any easier. It's only going to get worse.